Warm welcome to the press conference of the World Council of Churches. It's an honor to invite the journalists to be with us in this Zoom call, and we know that we have also many journalists following us online on Oikomene/live. My name is Marianne Edersten, Director of Communication, and I will try to guide you through this press conference. And we have a panel with our moderator of the Central Committee, Dr. Agnes Abuom. And then we have also our acting General Secretary, Reverend Professor Dr. Ioan Sauca present. And the press conference will be scheduled that we have a short introduction from Dr. Abuom and Dr. Sauca. And then we open up for questions from mainly the journalists in the Zoom call. Warm welcome. We have interpretation for those in the Zoom call. And for the others, it's English at the moment. So warm welcome once again. Dr. Agnes Abuom, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marianne. Men and women of the press, welcome once again. It is a pleasure for the leadership of the World Council of Churches to engage with you and share what we are doing these days together as a fellowship, and of course, as a governance organ of the World Council of Churches. As you are aware, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, it has not been possible for the World Council of Churches to hold in-person Central Committee meeting, nor to hold the executive. But because of the Swiss law that allows us to do electronic meetings, we've held executive committee meetings online. And after long, prayerful discernment process, this executive committee was convinced that so that we revive the spirit of fellowship, we are able to update each other, to pray together, and to continue to walk together. We felt it was necessary to organize this first online Central Committee meeting. Why are we gathered? As I said, number one is to continue to walk together prayerfully and to discern the will of God as we move towards the 11th Assembly. The second point is to keep the fellowship together. And so we have those churches that have also applied to join the fellowship. And that's an important aspect of our fellowship. So we are reflecting on specialized ministries and member churches and churches that would like to join us. We are also here to actually engage with the churches in terms of their delegations proposed, to look at the gaps, but more important also to look at the agenda of the 11th Assembly, and as well look at the program and to engage with the church and those that are hosting this assembly. As you are aware, one of the central issues that is taking a bit of our input and time is the impact of COVID on the life of the church and on the fellowship. The churches have experienced great losses. Communities cannot meet, but we have also seen very strong resilience by the churches. They've been able to organize under lockdown processes, ability mechanisms to do food rationing, to actually do ministry across the borders, which is something that has broadened the work of the council, and ability to the new technology in order to spread the gospel. We are committed as a fellowship to stay together and move together, irrespective of the challenges that we face economically, socially, and indeed, the church and the fellowship of the World Council of Churches continues to seek the unity of the church and the unity of humankind. We are in a situation, as I conclude these introductory remarks, when as a church, as a fellowship, we need to lift the hopes of the people. The focus of our ministry is hope amidst hopelessness. It is love amidst division, separation, and loss of lives. And therefore, this Central Committee is important in reigniting, reaffirming that we are one fellowship, we are each other's keeper, we are committed to continue together. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abuom. Then we invite the WCC Acting General Secretary, Reverend Professor Dr. Ioan Sauca. Your floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Marianne, and thank you, women and men of the press, or dear relatives, as I learned now from a pilgrimage of justice and peace in North America, how the indigenous people call one another relatives. I think it's a very important thing, and this is one of the learnings. The pandemic taught us that we belong to one another as a human family. As Christians, we say that we belong together as members of the body of Christ. But experiencing COVID, we learned how much we belong to one another as a human family. As you know, that Central Committee did not meet since 2018, and it has been postponed twice. Now we decided to have it online. And this is due to the tragic events caused by the pandemic. Not easy time. Our churches have been and are still under great suffering. Many church leaders and many people from our churches have died. Challenges are posed on the churches during the COVID pandemic. Yet, there is hope also in challenges. And briefly, I would like to share with you some of the learnings we had out of the pandemic. First, I said, we belong to one human family and we have to care for one another. Spiritually and theologically, but also humanly, we belong to one another. We are one human family. Secondly, the churches was mentioned they are resilient, but also we learned how to work differently. Both the churches, but also staff in the WCC. We learned how to work online. In the beginning, we were scared that working online may be impersonal and will distance ourselves from one another. What we learned, however, through the modern communication, we keep a koinonia, a communion among the staff. We continue to do our work in incredible ways. You may have seen from our monthly reports that a lot of amount of work has been done. And this is a new learning, online productions and online learning. We even had online visits in local churches, which had a great impact and a great result. Now, as a conclusion to this point, I think that even when we come to normality, our way of work will not be the same. We have to adapt a hybrid methodology, both by visiting in person, but also using the modern technology, which brings the world and the churches together. The second point, the pandemic provided an opportunity to more communication with member churches. Before we did it through emails and through letters. Now the COVID pandemic forced us to link to the churches via new ways of media. We have regional meetings. We have global meetings. We have webinars. We have global prayers. We have regional prayers. Every Monday morning, a person from another part of the world is giving a sermon to the prayer that we usually have every Monday in the community of WCC. So this is a good aspect also. We discovered that we can come together as a church family all over the world, praying for one another and sharing and supporting one another. The pandemic also made the existing inequalities more visible. Before we spoke about them, but now we could see practically how they are, particularly the sin of racism. Before pandemic, we were planning to launch a new program in the WCC on overcoming racism. However, analyzing the realities today, we said there is no time to wait the assembly. So we implemented this new program with the approval of our governing bodies. And from the 1st of January this year, we have a new program on overcoming racism. So a new position was opened, and then we selected a new person who will be employed from the 1st of July. Now, just the conclusion. We are moving towards the assembly. And the reason for my appointment after 1 month, 2 months, now until the end of 2022, was to make sure that the coordination and the preparation for the assembly are continued. So our concentration now is on the assembly. There are questions on the assembly. We are monitoring very closely the preparations for the assembly. I can share with you that next month, in July, we'll have an executive committee meeting one day to discuss about possibility or impossibilities of having an assembly. But as a conclusion, I can tell you as acting general secretary, from our experience, we are hopeful that we'll have an assembly. Europe and the world open up. There is a possibility now of the vaccine. If people are vaccinated, they could come to Germany. So we have great hopes that we'll have an assembly. Secondly, the theme of the assembly has proved to be providential. When this theme was chosen before the pandemic, we were not aware how providential the theme was. The love of Christ moves the world to reconciliation and unity. More than ever, we realize that unity is needed and the love of Christ is needed to reconcile and to unite humanity and the churches. So with that hope, we are moving towards the assembly, and we hope that you'll be joining us there in Karlsruhe, and then by God's grace, we'll have good results and good outcomes. Thank you very much.
Marianne, if you allow me.
Absolutely.
Just to add something that the women and men of the press may be asking in their hearts. You've heard that the World Council of Churches is working with a leadership that is actually preparing for the assembly. And the question is, why don't we have a substantive general secretary in place in terms of appointment election? As you're aware, 2022 March, we were to hold a central committee, which by our rules and constitution is the organ that elects the general secretary of the World Council of Churches. The such committee, which is that committee elected by the central committee and which is entrusted with the process of searching, proposing, did its work. But because of the pandemic, the central committee was not held. And that meant that everything was left in abeyance. Having said that, what is the next step? In terms of processes of preparation and leadership for that, I think we are home and dry. In terms of fulfilling our legal constitutional mandate, we need to have a general secretary. The reason why the World Council of Churches so far has not elected its general secretary is because our law, our constitution and rule require that a general secretary is elected at a central committee meeting in person. Therefore, the executive committee wrestled with this matter, and we decided to convene this central committee with a very limited agenda, but also to hear what the executive committee has proposed. And that is that we believe early 2022 we'll have a central committee that will elect a general secretary by God's grace. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abuom. Then we have the time for media to ask questions, and we have already received 5-6 questions. And I would like to invite Jan Herberman from Evangelical Presidents to introduce yourself and then ask your question. This is the first round of questions. You might be welcome back for a second round. The floor is yours, Jan.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Jan Herberman. I write for EPD, that's a Protestant news agency from Frankfurt, Germany. I'm based here in Geneva. And my question is on the assembly in Karlsruhe next year, or I should say the planned assembly. Mr. Secretary General, you were saying there are questions on the assembly. So could you please elaborate on this? What are the open questions? And secondly, what have you decided so far, yesterday and today, on the assembly? And final question, how risky is it in the time of a global pandemic to hold such a mass event in 2022? Many thanks.
Thank you for the question. So somehow you opened the answer with your second question. What do you do in this time of pandemic? So people from the executive committee had the same question. Are you sure that in the reality of this pandemic, we can have next year an assembly? And we said we cannot give you an answer. Last month when we have the executive committee, we said we need some time to gather more data from the World Health Organization and from other areas of specialists in this field, and come with clear data on the 15th of July when we discuss this issue. I just share with you my personal hope that from the data I have until now, I can say, yes, we can have an assembly. But the one which decides we have it or not have it will be the executive committee, which will meet on the 15th of July. What we decided about the assembly, we have 2 reports of the Assembly Planning Committee and Worship Planning Committee, which are very well elaborated, very well done. We presented these reports now to the Central Committee, and then we'll let you know what will be the results, because they have to vote and accept these reports. But what I can tell you now, if you didn't read the reports, they are so well elaborated internationally, which made me say that if this is going to be implemented, we'll have a great assembly.
Thank you, Dr. Sauca. Maybe turn off your mic.
Let me compliment also what the General Secretary has said. You did ask what are those open questions that might be worth reflecting on going forward. Justice in accessing vaccine. I myself struggled to get vaccinated the second round before coming here. And that shows you the limited access to vaccines in the global south, not least in my country, could become a deterrent of many of our delegates attending the assembly. And therefore, we are advocating for justice in distribution and access to the vaccine. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abuom. I have a question also in written form. I think we could address that one to Dr. Abuom also. How has the process for the Pilgrims of Justice of Peace changed in the midst of the pandemic, and how have you been able to accompany the member churches across the globe? You mentioned in your report that you have recently attended the pilgrimage to North America.
Thank you for that report. I think one of the things that we need to note is pilgrimage has a connotation of movement. And within the framework of the pilgrimage of justice and peace, we have what we call team visits that are in-person, physical. One of the lessons we learned, you can still visit with people online. That has its positives and limitations. And that's a major learning, because one of the issues that we need to pick up out of online for further refinement is the fact that you have to ensure safe, sacred space. You have to ensure inclusivity in participation, in voices. You have to be sure that those voices of the margins are actually highlighted, lifted, and to the people that need to hear those voices. So for North America, the colleagues who have been on this have actually harvested quite a lot. This particular session within the Pilgrimage of Justice and Peace was in two phases. One was to visit with the communities, churches, First Nations in North America, but also for the reference group to begin a process of harvesting what we have actually learned, what has been difficult, what has been joyful in terms of moving forward. What is it that we can share with the rest of the world and the church, both in Germany and even before and post Karlsruhe? Therefore, the Pilgrimage of Justice and Peace is opening up a new understanding of pilgrimage that requires theological reflection afresh. Already, men and women with disability had raised that question earlier on, but now we are beginning to find new ways of actually walking together, praying together, and being together. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abuom. Then we have a question to Dr. Sauca. You mentioned in your report yesterday that the WCC has changed the priorities a little bit and tried to accompany the member churches during the pandemic and also the post-pandemic. Can you bring one or two concrete examples? That's a question coming to us from social media at the moment.
We had many requests from churches, especially in time of pain and deaths that people had to deal with. And we had questions from the churches to organize a global prayer. So we had a global prayer remembering those who passed away and also comforting their families. So this happened, I think was in January. Altogether, we had a global prayer. Then we had other sufferings in other parts of the world. For instance, we had churches in Colombia. So what can you do to help us? We took an initiative and we took their side in their struggle in Colombia. Then was the events in Myanmar. Also, we took the side of the churches, defending the human rights and asking for justice and for respect of human dignity. What I'm say, I was very proud, and I mentioned to you yesterday, I was very much myself involved in restructuring and reinforcing the WCC activities in the Holy Land. So we are in the process now of reshaping and reinforcing our activities in the Holy Land. And why I say I'm happy, because this is done now with the local churches in the Holy Land. It is not a program from outside, but is a program which is owned by the churches and is fully coordinated by the WCC. We are having now developed a very clear policy on advocacy and on statements. And I look forward to have a very strong program, well coordinated from Geneva, from the WCC, but responding to the needs of the Christians and the people in the Holy Land. So just a few examples. I can mention Ethiopia, I can mention South Sudan. They are all churches which ask for our help, and we are on their side during time of pandemic.
Thank you, Dr. Sauca. We have at least 7 more questions, and I would like to invite Martin Höger to enter the floor. The floor is yours.
Yes, good morning. I'm Martin Höger, a pastor of the Reformed Church, and I'm writing for Reformed Media. Thank you very much for this press conference. It's a question to Dr. Abuom. I was impressed in your conference that on your insistence on the importance of vaccination. That's you wrote even that's the entry point to recovery from the COVID-19, and I can understand very well that it's very important, especially justice in vaccination. But I didn't read anything about the question of early treatments. I know it's a sensitive question, but I didn't read anything in your report about that, and also in the communication of the World Council of Churches. Why does the World Council of Churches say nothing about these treatments, which are, some of them are very low cost, and they are used in countries where the income is much less higher than in Switzerland. For instance, in India, in some states of India, in Mexico, and some states of Brazil, they use early treatments and low-cost medicines, which had a lot of success. I know that the World Health Organization criticizes some of these treatments, but it had to also admit that the success of these treatments, which are also necessary. So I would like to understand about this question of the between is there only vaccination which can lead us to come out from COVID, but are there also other treatments?
Thank you very much, Martin. If you look at my report, I do raise, going forward, the very vital role of church hospitals, church health workers as a very, very primary issue. And why is it primary? It is primary because even as World Council of Churches, we have prioritized health and healing. Health and healing, and I do talk about a wholesome church. My own church talks about wholesome church, wholesome community. Treatment is very critical. We have not mentioned it during this particular session, but it is at the very heart of the ministry of the church in the world globally, and particularly in the global south. During this pandemic, we have had traditional medication, herbal medicine, and Western medicine. As I speak here, my own local church is situated in a place where we have those professional herbal people working together with the Western medicine, particularly on this pandemic, so that people can preempt. And but there is also caution for people to be careful. So the whole ministry of prevention, healing, health is very central, and we have highlighted and lifted it up now here in this World Council of Churches, which I know that it will be of great help to the communities and to the churches. But don't forget, prevention is not just medication. It is also lifestyle. It is also food security. And today we are battling a major issue, challenge of inadequate food. Look at the statistics. So please go cover the next food summit and tell the powers that be not to undermine small-scale farmers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abuom. We have many questions, and I know that some of the journalists have also weak connection, and you are more than welcome to type your question to my team. They monitor all the time. Now it's Volonyana Rosavellionina. Your question. Welcome to enter the floor.
Oui. Oui, j'ai une question. Je vais parler en français.
I'm going to speak in French.
I'm going to speak in French.
You are able to speak in French.
OK. Merci. Je suis...
Thank you. My name is Wununanya, and I'm in charge of the new religions and international dimensions at the Radio for the Reformed Church in Madagascar. And I read in the news releases for the WCC that the Central Committee is going to receive a report on the Green Village building development project. Could you please say a few words about what this project consists of exactly, the Green Village Property Development Project, and how this operates exactly? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we will refer the question to Dr. Sauca and then Dr. Abuom.
Je peux répondre en français ou en
I
anglais?
answer in French. It's easier in French. So let me answer in French. Is that okay for you?
For the others, is okay. So what is the others? Can they listen also in il peut écouter aussi
They can also listen in English. Okay, fine. Yes, madam. Thank you very much for your question. Now, I would just like to say a few words. It's an extraordinary project for us, which gives us a vision and a future for the World Council of Churches. So when we say Green Village, this is a building complex of buildings located around the WCC headquarters on WCC premises. Some of these buildings have already been placed on sale, but all of the organizations around us share our values, the WCC values, and the way in which this has been organized was in full respect for all of the environmental regulations. Thus, we call it the Green Village Property Development Project. With regard to the details and the environmental regulations, as we see it, this is an extraordinary source which we intend to exploit with great hopes. At the same time, the commune of Grand Saconnet, where we are located, and the city of Geneva were also very satisfied with this project.
Thank you very much. Then I will turn to Dr. Abuom also to comment on Green Village.
Thank you very much. I think Father has given the overall purpose, the ethos of this Green Village. Green, environmentally sound, but also a village that offers future sustainability of the council and the movement. It is one where we hope, and if you see the names of the buildings, they are actually those capitals where key United Nations meetings were held with the issues of environment and so forth. And so I think just to conclude that many of our member churches have assets, and particularly land, and a number have been trying to add value to have this land value addition. But in our case, we had a challenge, and that gave us also an opportunity to actually use our asset in a much broader sense. We were to address a deficit we had, and that, you know, they always say a challenge brings an opportunity. So the vision of this Green Village is very multidimensional. and it will host some of our communities like the LWF, ACT Alliance, ourselves. But what is also important is the fact that in the design, the chapel, which is a very interesting, very awesome place, is left intact. And that says a lot, because at the heart of this project is a very deep spirituality on how we use land, how we use our resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abuom. Then we have a question from Dexter van Ziele. The floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup, Dr. Abuom.
Thank you so much. My name is Dexter Van Zyl, and I work for the Committee for Accuracy in Middle East Reporting and Analysis here in the United States. Good morning or good afternoon. Will the WCC be participating in the upcoming Durban Memorial Conference, the 20th anniversary of the 2001 conference that exhibited many problems in reference to anti-Semitism at that conference? And there's evidence to indicate that the WCC actually made that problem a little bit worse when there was legitimate concerns about the relationship between anti-Israel rhetoric and violence against Jews throughout the world. Will the WCC be participating in that upcoming memorial? And if yes, what role will it play? And will it disavow what it did previously in 2001?
Thank you very much for the question. I think I will address them to Dr. Sauca.
Well, I'm not aware, and I don't think we are going to participate because we very strongly stay on our policies, and we are not going to change our policies. And I told everybody who asked me that question, we have very clear policies since 1948. Anti-Semitism for us is a sin, and we keep saying that is a sin. You cannot be Christian denying our Christian roots, which are Jewish. We started from there. So to be anti-Semit is against my identity. We keep saying is a sin. Second thing, we recognize officially the state of Israel. So we cannot be against the state of Israel. It's very clear. And we will continue to do that. But at the same time, we speak about the right of people there who are under occupation to be liberated from the occupation. And saying about human rights, we speak on the basis of our Christian values, but based on international law and on human rights. Human rights for everybody, not only, how do you say, selective human rights. And when I speak about human rights, they must be applied equally to Palestinians and to the Israelis in the state of Israel. And now in this 1 year or so, I was in this position. I insisted any suffering of any people in the Holy Land must be highlighted and pointed to. Because in a conflict, you cannot demonize only one and make saint one. And we have, from our point of view, whenever you have a case where human dignity or human rights are not respected, we have to speak up. So what I promise you, this is going to happen, to be honest and transparent, working with the people there in the Holy Land, involving the churches, and working with Palestinians and Jews in the Holy Land. And I was very encouraged that Ishchik, for instance, with whom we restarted a very good dialogue, they promised to be part of this group of accompaniment, EAPPI, accompaniment of churches in Israel and Palestine. So I insist that we have to be together and to support one another in affirming human dignity and human rights, and not demonizing one another.
Thank you, Dr. Sauca. Then we will turn to the second round of questions, and then I invite Jan Dirk Herbermann to ask his second question. The floor is yours. You are muted, Jan.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I would like to come back to the assembly next year. Just to be absolutely clear, you said you are hopeful, or you are very hopeful, that you will have the assembly in September in Karlsruhe, but at the same time, you said that basically the final decision will be taken on the 15th of July in the executive committee. And I suppose that this decision can be revised any time afterwards. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question. Who wants?
I think I start, and then my boss will complete with her opinion. Of course, we never know what may happen in November or December, God knows. But as we have the data now, I can say not I'm very helpful, I'm extremely helpful myself. But still the body which decides is the executive committee, our governing body, where people come together to reflect on the data we are going to present, and they take a decision. But if I go further reflecting, I may tell you, as you asked the question, if things happen to the worst in January or December, and then we lock down again, I don't think God will listen what we decided in July. The whole world will have to change. But as it is now, I don't think this will happen.
Thank you, Dr. Sauca. Then we turn to Dr. Abuom. What would you respond to the same question?
Yeah, thank you. This is a question really that is on our minds and with those who are hosting this assembly. The unfortunate thing is that the pandemic keeps mutating, and so we don't know about tomorrow. Having said that, nevertheless, it is important as people of faith to continue to have hope based also on information, data available, and on that, we do believe we'll have an assembly in one way or another. But as we stand now, during this Central Committee, we are sure by God's grace, we'll have an assembly. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abuom. Then we have the final question. I invite Martin Hegger for a second question. Oh, we have one more question also after Martin. Martin, the floor is yours. Unfortunately, you are still muted, so please unmute.
You hear me?
Yes, we are able to hear you.
Yes, it's a question for you, Ioan, and maybe Dr. Abuom may also reply after. Ioan, you are the first Orthodox General Secretary of the WCC. I appreciated your theological reflection on the theme of the next World Assembly. And my question is, what is in your experience, now from more than 1 year, the main contribution you gave to the fellowship of the churches as an Orthodox General Secretary? And maybe Agnes may also respond to what does it mean for her working with an Orthodox General Secretary?
Martin was my student about a decade ago, so that's why he asked this question. You see, when you are in a position of leadership, you don't act as an Orthodox or non-Orthodox. It is a business of the institution. So I did my best to manage the institution. Secondly, if you ask what was my contribution as an Orthodox, I think I helped develop the unpacking of the assembly theme. Because when you say the love of Christ moves the world, there are many voices which say we come to a Christology, which is very straitjacket, speaking only about Christians and excluding the others. Say, how can you speak only about the love of Christ in a Europe, which is no longer, how do you say, majority Christian, or is a multi-faith society? We cannot exclude the others. So I brought then the theology of the early church, which never saw Christ as an exclusive theological stand. When we say about Christ, we speak about the love of God to the world manifested in the incarnation in Christ. So the whole team took a Trinitarian perspective, which opened up the dialogue with the world. What is the purpose of God in Christ for the world, for humanity? What are the possibilities of dialogue with people of other faiths? So all that is possible due to this new direction which was given to unpacking of the assembly. And I would say is not something very new that I brought myself. It's going in the line of the WCC earlier statements, because if you take the CUV document, Common Understanding and Vision, will tell you the same thing, that the purpose of God in Christ was the reconciliation and unity of the whole of humanity and the whole of the cosmos. So I think this is from the theological point of view. Now, the other thing, what you may have seen also as an Orthodox theologian, I very much insisted that the WCC is a fellowship of churches. So let's have a language which is the language of a church, and the language which is understood by the people of our churches, while not neglecting to speak about the needs of the world and how the gospel should be applied in response to the needs of the world. And I think you have seen that in our press releases, in our presentations, this kind of spiritual trend, which can be seen now the way we speak. The third thing, also the insistence on prayer. I insisted on prayer, and I believe in prayer. Prayer can destroy walls, and prayer gives hope to the churches and to the world. The power of prayer. And I see I was not alone. Not only the Orthodox churches, but churches all over the world are asking for prayer. And we could meet one another in a mood of prayer. But maybe my boss Agnes can tell more what an Orthodox helped in the WCC.
Thank you, Dr. Sauca. Let's turn to Dr. Agnes, Anglican.
The language of boss. Well, thank you so much for that question. We have to see the contribution of Father Sauca in the context of the situation in which he's exercising leadership. And that is very important. It is a servant leadership that is seeking to listen, to serve. And that is not easy when you operate in very dynamic, depressive situation. Not that the things are new to him, as they've also been there for other leaders. But this is a very unique context where he's not able to be in face meetings with those that he's praying with all the time. Having said that, one of the things that has come out strongly is the very deep spirituality that is taking center space. Look at our media. The communication department is churning out materials, resource material on prayers, whether it is on COVID, on what. And that is something that communities, individuals, and churches need today. So embodied in his ministry and now in his leadership is that art of bringing out that which unites us, that which, the glue that keeps this fellowship together. And as an Orthodox and an African, I find a lot of commonality with him in his faith. And so I think, give us time as we are in Karlsruhe to actually assess what we personally have had. But I want us to also remember the conditions. And that is why the centrality of prayer, spirituality, and he can tell you that staff and others are online praying every day. That is a new momentum. Thank you.
Thank you for these wonderful answers.
Thank you, Dr. Abuom. We have two more questions, and I will give it a try to close the press conference at 1 o'clock as promised, because we have other meeting coming up soon. Then I will invite Voloniana, and I think we will turn to French. You are muted. Please unmute.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, says
Je crois
Bologna.
que l'Église
Now,
catholique,
I think that the Catholic Church,
romaine participera à
the Roman
l'Assemblée,
Catholic
à la
Church
11e
will be
Assemblée.
participating
L'année
in the
prochaine,
assembly next
y
year.
aurait-il
Because
un
the
membre
Roman
à part
Catholic
entière
Church of
du
Vienna,
Conseil
a
œcuménique
fully
des
fledged member
Églises,
of the WCC,
participera-t-elle seulement
will
en
be
tant qu'observateur
participating
comme
as an
avant?
observer as
Merci beaucoup.
before? That's my question.
Thank you very much. We turn it to Dr. Sauca.
C'est une question extrêmement importante.
That's a very important question indeed. And as I was a professor and director at Bosse, been hearing the same question for 25 years now. What can I say? Well, they are there in Karlsruhe. They are invited to attend the assembly in Karlsruhe. They are not members of the WCC, but they participate in a fully fledged manner in our programs. In Faith and Constitution, they are represented. In the evangelization mission, they are present. They have a professor who is actually a dean at the Bosse Ecumenical Institute, who is a Catholic. They are represented now in the pontifice of Pope Francis. We have very close cooperation in this respect, in every respect. Now, if they become members, whether they will become members, that's a slightly more delicate issue. And that is a theological and ecclesiastical issue. We have discussed this in great detail. I don't want to go into depth, but this is not really very easy for the Roman Catholic Church to become a member of the WCC because precisely of these ecclesiological conditions. But I would like to take a more practical perspective. From a statistical perspective, if you divide the world up, we can say that 50% are Catholics. Now, if you ask the Catholics to become members, then you also would have to make sure that the staff reflect the number of Christians within the WCC. So then more than half would have to be Catholics, half of the staff here at WCC. Now that is not possible either from an organizational perspective, because there would no longer be a balance. That's one point. Then my second point, we are members because every Église, Protestant, Orthodox, Anglican, we are national churches. The Catholic Church is a single church. There are no national Catholic churches. There is a single church, the Roman Catholic Church. So it is not really possible to enter into these same structures because there is a different vision with regard to the church.
For that, then we will turn to Dexter van Ziele. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Dr. Sauca mentions in his statement the consolidation and the reshaping of the work associated with the EAPPI, and I was just wondering, was that in response a little bit to what Dr. David Sandmel said in 2016? He's a participant in the IJKIC process. And what exactly does that reshaping and the consolidation mean? Will we see a more balanced narrative coming out of the activists from the EAPPI and also other WCC supported staffers in Jerusalem going forward?
So we will share with you the whole of our structure proposals, and I promise this to you. It's not something secret, it's open. What we meant to do there? First, to your question. We listen to what people say, because as Agnes said, I am myself like to listen, but I'm never influenced to the point of taking decision by listening what people say here and there. It's like the firework mentality, say it's burning, let's do something. No, we have to be very objective and analyze the realities. So when we started the consolidation, we asked the churches in the Holy Land, what are your problems? What are the priorities? What should we do? What do you expect from us? We came together with the national coordinators, with the people involved in the program, and we did together say, what can we do now? So the idea was to consolidate one Jerusalem liaison office, where all the activities will go in one office. And this one is directly related to a staff responsible for Middle East, which is based in Geneva. All the activities and the programs are going to be approved by our governing bodies like any program of the WCC. As I mentioned to you, the second thing is about advocacy. How do they do advocacy? We have a policy on advocacy, which is also to be approved by our governing bodies. So we have clear lines now, who is doing what and how we do it. And why we do that? To be sure that whoever speaks on behalf of these programs speaks in the line of the WCC policies, not let to have freelancers speaking here and there, how they think and how they like. So this is what we try to do now, to be faithful to ourselves and faithful to the WCC policies, to speak in the line of our policies, but also to be respectful to the people in the Holy Land and to the expectations of one or the others there. So this is our hope, and I can, as I promised to you, we can give you everything and share with you, because nothing is secret.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sauca. We have also two more questions. We will try to handle both of them. The first one is to Dr. Abuom about Thursdays in Black. Why are we behind the Thursdays in Black campaign? And then I will ask my colleague Marcelo to read the question we have received from Argentina after that. The floor is yours, Dr. Agnes.
Thank you very much. Why Thursdays in Black? I will not go into the history, but simply state that we want a world without rape and violence against whatever gender, but particularly women. The weaponization of rape women in conflict zones, the current domestic violence is such a big move. If there is anything that the pandemic has actually brought to the surface, is the gender-based violence. The numbers are incredible. More men, more women, more boys, more girls, and this is unacceptable. And so Thursdays in Black has a history of women struggling to stop violence and rape, sexual violence. It's a movement that has been on for some years now. Me Too movement in the States joined us, and we have ambassadors to really preach the message of a peaceful world, of a world without rape, without sexual violence. This is something that dehumanizes to the very core. And if you've never had a friend, a family friend, someone close to you who has experienced this, and the traumatic mental agony they go through, you will not understand why this movement is so critical, because it's the one thing that literally demolishes the very identity, the very dignity of a person. So Thursdays in Black, which is under the program of Just Community of Men and Women, is to try to mobilize opinion, awareness, that there are other ways to be a man and a woman, positive femininity, positive masculinity. There are ways to negotiate and to navigate life. You don't have to rape. And for God's sake, we don't want these conflicts constantly impacting so negatively on children and women. And cycles of conflict, cycles of war have left all of us wounded. And it is this woundedness that the pilgrimage of justice and peace is picking up also in its lessons and in its harvest, to see how do we move forward as people of faith, as nations, with communities that have been wounded over and over, traumatized over and over. We are moving zombies, people that are empty shells, but we pretend in our ties, in our suits, in our beautiful perfumes, but we are just corpses because we are dehumanized. We are completely emasculated of any emotions and compassion. This is what we want to stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abuom. Then we turn to the final question for this session, and for journalists following us, there's plenty of opportunities to continue the dialogue with WCC also after the press conference. We are here to support you. I turn to Marcelo Schneider. You will read a question we have received from Argentina.
Yes, we have a question from ALC News journalist Claudia Florentin, who is currently in the rural area of Argentina. She has the following question. From the south of the globe where I live, we think we need to talk more about the environmental connections that led to this pandemic. We need to report more on human invasion of nature without limits and accompany the churches in programs that lead to food sovereignty. Otherwise, we will remain prisoners of pandemics and laboratories of saviors of humanity. Is the World Council of Churches working on these issues for the Assembly in Carlos Ruiz and for the future?
Thank you, Marcelo. I think we could invite both Dr. Abuom and Dr. Sauca to respond. Which one will begin?
Thank you. A very, very critical question indeed. As we move forward, we are aware that those who know what they are doing have already predicted more viruses. And the more we infringe on the liberty of nature, the more we destroy the biodiversity, the more we actually invite these viruses. There is a very close link, and that is why the visit to North America with the First Nations, the link with the nature, the link with the land, the link with the created nature is very critical, because it is there where we destroy that which is supposed to give us hope, to feed us, to nurture us, and to help us live meaningful lives. The World Council of Churches has actually a campaign and an advocacy program on food security and food sovereignty. We hope that the linkage, the relationship between climate change, climate justice, economic justice can be a major thrust at the Assembly. And this is critical because it is a relational issue. We cannot talk about economic justice when we have a few companies around the world extracting resources at will, no rule of law, no nothing. They're just above the law. And the consequences affect more people, like now what we are experiencing. The SARS, this particular one, is believed to be part of lab work, but also the declining biodiversity and its effects on our lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abuom. Should we turn to Dr. Sauca for
Yes,
a final one?
I will say just a few words. So these are the statistics and the realities. I would come to say, what would be the voice of the churches as a Christian value? We are part of creation. We are created out of the dust. I cannot speak about me and creation. I am part of creation. I cannot survive without creation. If I destroy creation, I destroy myself. So this is a interlinkage which has a deep spirituality. And then in the WCC programs that we are developing, we are bringing the added value of our ecological discourse. We speak like the others, but also from a faith perspective, which must go also to be conveyed to the people in the pews, so that everybody becomes aware of the relationship between human family and creation. We can survive only if we survive together.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abuom and Dr. Sauca, for being with us for more than an hour, as we have promised the journalists. We say thank you to all journalists present in the Zoom call. We say thank you to other followers online. And let's stay in touch. We need the support from media to cover what we are doing in the World Council of Churches worldwide. You are doing a wonderful work for us to work for unity, justice, and peace. Let's stay connected, and thank you very much once again.
Thank you.